We are now going to start the webinar by getting into the right atmosphere. So I ask you for a moment of silence. I invite you to gather for a moment of prayer, each of one in silence, according to your own religion. Whoever wants can use this prayer of St. Francis we're going to share on the screen for peace. So thank you very much all for joining us today. Let us continue with our celebration of International Women's Day 2024. I am Lavinia Rocchi, Secretary General of WUCWO, the World Union of Catholic Women's Organizations. And today I have the honor of moderating a group of very inspiring and fantastic women. And since now I thank them for their contribution and participation. And I give a warm welcome to all of you that are connected from around the world. So our aim is to reflect and react today as women and men of faith to the culture of peace and encounter. We come together to discern on how religions may commit to building peace through this culture of dialogue and encounter. And each of the panelists, from their personal experiences, their realities, culture, faith, and mission, will share how all, and especially women, are capable of being builders of peace and dialogue. So let me not take up more time, and let me start giving the floor to Monica Santamarina, WUCWO's President General, for the opening remarks. So, dear Monica, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lavinia. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good night to everybody. As most of the panelists will be speaking in English today, I will be speaking in Spanish, considering our multiple audience. And besides, it's my language, so it's going to be easier for me. Thanks a lot. Ok, a nombre de la Unión Mundial de Organizaciones Femeninas Católicas,
On behalf of the World Union of Catholic Women's Organization, I wish to thank you all for being here with us once again. As we have done in the past 5 years, we celebrate International Women's Day with women from different religious traditions. And this time we have chosen the topic of peace and the encounter, which is very much needed in today's world. We, women of faith, who share the conviction of that there are essential values to reach brotherhood in the world, are convinced of the importance of dignity and human rights, particularly in the case of women and the most vulnerable people, religious freedom, the elimination of every type of slavery. And we play an essential role in our societies and in our families to promote peace. The faith that each one of us professes according to their own tradition gives us a peace and inner strength. We need to project peace within our families, communities, and thus cultivate a culture of the encounter. We will hear very valuable and interesting contributions from different religious perspectives. And undoubtedly, they will inspire us to redouble our efforts to continue the ecumenical and interreligious dialogue initiated 5 years ago, so as to sow more and more seeds of peace, which will allow us to cultivate the encounter among all human beings, regardless of their origin, ethnic group, nationality, or religion. WUCWO is an organization representing more than 100 organizations of women, is well aware of the critical issues affecting women's lives. Its mission for more than 113 years has been to promote the presence, participation, and co-responsibility of Catholic women in the Church and the world. To this effect, it works for human development, promotes dignity and respect for human rights, especially those of women and girls. It promotes awareness and respect for cultural diversity, creating networks with other international organizations and faith communities. And it promotes an ecumenical and interreligious dialogue. Thanks to the work of our women and organizations around the world and the recent creation of our Global Observatory of Women, we are witnesses to the difficult situations experienced by millions of women in the various regions of the world, but also of their resilience and strengths. Suffice it to see how in situations of war and conflict that the world is currently experiencing, women and girls are the most harmed, those who suffer the most. Conflicts arising from political, economic, organized crime, or climate disasters often leave women alone in taking charge of their families or migrating in search of better opportunities in the world, making them vulnerable, the most vulnerable, discriminated against, and often aggressed and harmed. Yet, with their resilience and ability to listen, women retain the talent to be builders of dialogue and peace. This is what we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic. Indeed, one of the specific characteristics of women is their capacity to create human relationships. For women, it is natural to promote a climate in which people can grow and an environment promoting the inclusion of the others, especially the weakest, a culture of the encounter. Together, as women of peace, we shall try and discern together how to commit ourselves to building peace through the encounter. In this process, each of us has a small part of co-responsibility. His Holiness Pope Francis asks of us to promote actions that enhance peace and put an end to the conflicts and war that continue to generate poverty and death. He calls us to join together to educate and dialogue for a more fraternal humanity and a more just, respectful, and peaceful world. Let us try, as the Holy Father asks us, to put the word together at the center. Indeed, only together, men and women, in fraternity and solidarity, can build peace, ensure justice, and overcome the most difficult events and the most painful events. In this effort to cultivate the culture of the encounter, WUCWO, together with the network of the Dicastery for Interreligious Dialogue, which has always shared or participated in our dialogue as it did in 2023, is filled with hope in being able to share the riches that each of the panelists will bring with their respective visions and experiences determined by their faith to continue this journey together. We want to continue to be women of resilience and dialogue, nourished by the faith that allows us to overcome adversity with strength and hope. We will work together to make people understand that we are all sisters and brothers, united by the dream of the encounter, dialogue, justice, and peace. I wish to conclude with some of the words that Pope Francis spoke on 1st January. The world needs to look to mothers and women too to find peace, to escape from the spiral of violence and hatred, and to return to having human gazes and hearts that see. Every society needs to welcome the gift of women, of every woman, to respect her, take care of them, to value them, knowing that whoever hurts a woman goes against God. Thanks to all those who are with us, and especially thanks to all those courageous, committed, resilient women of faith who, from their own religious tradition and wherever they live, sow seeds of peace and thus foster the culture of the encounter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. And as some of you will remember, WUCWO started to celebrate International Women's Day interreligiously back in 2020 in collaboration with the Dicastery for Interreligious Dialogue. We had planned the participation of the prefect of the Dicastery for Interreligious Dialogue, Cardinal Ayuso, today, but unfortunately, due to his health situation, His Eminence will not be able to join us. We send him our most sincere wishes for a speedy recovery, and he has asked Sister Grace Marie Horan from the Dicastery to read his remarks. So, dear Sister Grace, thank you for your help. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lavinia. Can you hear me okay? Hello,
Yes,
everyone. Good to be with you. And yes, again, Cardinal Ayuso sends his sincere regrets and his greetings to all of you for a successful time together today. So these are Cardinal Ayuso's remarks. I thank you very much for the kind invitation to this significant ecumenical and interreligious webinar. To reflect on the crucial role played by women of belief in building a culture of encounter is a worthy and fruitful undertaking. All of you are involved in the work of peace building, and you each have wisdom to share from your experiences. We are blessed to hear directly from 6 of you today. The work of peace building is sustained by the stories that we pass on about those who have gone before us. And it's motivated by the hope we have for those who are following after us, especially children. The substance of those stories is faith, and faith sustains us. In this brief moment, I would like to share a few thoughts on faith, because faith feeds our hearts and cultivates peace. Pope John the 23rd said in his letter on peace, written in 1963, "The world will never be the dwelling place of peace till peace has found a home in the heart of every man and woman." As followers of religious traditions, we revere women of faith and look to them as models. Our foremothers provide us with spiritual riches by their example of faith, courage, and perseverance in the cause of peace. In my own Catholic tradition, the first of these women is Mary, the mother of Jesus. In Mary's encounter with her cousin Elizabeth, recounted in the Gospel of Luke, we see two aspects of faith. We may call them the interior and the exterior, or faith alive in the heart and faith expressed in word and action. Mary lives both aspects of faith with an intensity that is often characteristic of women's faith. Her cousin recognizes Mary's interior act of faith, which she makes in the depths of her being, saying to her, "Blessed are you who believed that what was spoken to you by the Lord God would be fulfilled." Elizabeth is referring to the fact that after receiving the heavenly visitor, the angel Gabriel, who announces to her that she will conceive and bear the Son of God, Mary puts her trust in God, affirming her readiness to do God's will, even though it was frightening. Elizabeth recognizes Mary's interior act of faith, and she is the beneficiary of Mary's faith-filled actions. Mary's faith and trust in God make her bold to act for others' benefit. The gospel tells us, Mary set out to the hill country with haste. Though she was pregnant and in a precarious state of uncertainty, Mary sets out on a journey to assist Elizabeth, who was pregnant in her old age, as the angel had told her. The account of Mary and Elizabeth's encounter culminates in a magnificent prayer of praise to God, in which Mary exalts God's goodness towards the lowly and the hungry in body and spirit. So many people today are in need of this strong faith of Mary and of your foremothers, followers of many religious traditions, who looked up to God, to the transcendent, making acts of trust and then allowing their faith to spur them to action for good. As we work at sowing seeds of peace, let us always cultivate what is most essential, the flame of faith within our hearts. It is nourished by remembering and revering the stories of so many people of faith who have gone before us. I thank you once again for this opportunity and give special gratitude to Monica Santamarina and the World Union of Catholic Women's Organizations, and to those ambassadors to the Holy See supporting their work. May you all be blessed with the gift of peace in your hearts as you carry out your work to make the world a more peaceful place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Grace, for reading His Eminence's remarks. Very encouraging and inspiring. Thank you. Now let's move on to the contributions of our guest speakers. They are women leaders of different religious traditions. Some of them have been accompanying us for some time on this path of dialogue and reflection. Some belong to a network of women of faith that have been working together for 1 year now. And each of them will speak about a specific theme based on their expertise and faith, and they will share their testimonies to inspire and motivate and help us spread peace and cultivate encounter. So let us begin with the Islamic perspective, with the contribution of Mrs. Rudina Kolaku. I hope, Rudina, you can see us. And Rudina, she's the founder and executive director of the Women's Center for Development and Culture in Albania. She's also director of the Women Department in Interreligious Collaboration Center in Elbasan in Albania. And based on her direct experience, she will talk to us about preventing extremism among youth. So thank you for being with us today, Rudina. The floor is yours.
Greetings to all. Thank you, Lavinia, for this great opportunity. My esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests and participants, it is both an honor and a profound responsibility to stand before you today to discuss a matter of urgent importance, preventing extremism among youth, a call to action. As we embark on this conference, it is a pleasure to reflect on the one-year journey together since the last meeting in Rome, how the network has been vital and aims to continue through the organization of meetings and events, emphasizing the multidimensional role of women in different spheres in international days for more attention from all high-level stakeholders, but not only. The last millennium decade has brought to the world a number of new and old threats to global security, including violent extremism, wars, conflicts, recruitments, criminal and radical groups such as White Wings, Golden Dawn in Greece, the prolonged conflict in Syria, and recently the war in Ukraine, where youth are in danger of recruitments and victims. The Global Terrorism Index 2024 reports show that deaths from terrorism increased by 22% to 8,352 deaths in 2023 and are now at the highest level since 2017. Thousands of young people from more than 100 countries have been joined to ISIS, representing a critical challenges to global security and the safety communities. Events, attacks, and increasing threats in beginning of the millennium brought major changes in the concept of security, from shifting the paradigm from traditional military and territorial focus to a more comprehensive approach that includes environment, health, and other issues related to the security. This change was particularly driven by the needs to address new global challenges, as well as the inclusion for more actors. For the first time in 2000, women are recognized from United Nations Security Council as negotiators, conflict zones, and advocates in political decision-making by promoting for the first time the Resolution 1325, Women, Peace, and Security. In 2015, United Nations Security Council, also seeing violent extremism as a threat to youth, agreed on the adoption of the Resolution 2250, Youth, Peace, and Security, emphasizing the need for action and the importance of involving young people at the global and national level to address violent extremism through engagement and spaces that is offered to young people in all process of global security. Youth make up 1.2 billion people, or 16% of the global population, and can be particularly vulnerable to the message of extremism and terrorist organization. On the other hand, they also are a great potential to contribute to the development and progress of society. For this reason, international strategies and conventions have emphasized the inclusion of young people in all aspects of social engagement, from the highest hierarchy to the grassroots levels. As mentioned in the Radicalization Awareness Network RAN document, one of the key lessons is the importance of creating safe space for young people and their involvement in decision-making, including activities that promote positive youth development. In my experience as a youth trainer in PCVE, Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism, in cooperation with various NGOs and youth forums, we have worked continually for youth and community engagement to combat violent extremism in all dimensions and spheres. Meanwhile, all the state actors, government, institutional organizations, and other entities have set up a series of mechanisms, legal reform strategies with action plans for combating and preventing violent extremism. We have worked to build bridges of cooperation between all stakeholders, including religious institutions, practitioners, and youth, for better cooperation and to see in the whole society approach. Our approach to the strategy for the prevention of violent extremism relies on a comprehensive model, as I mentioned before, where different and multiple actors collaborate in a common front to build resilient communities. WCDCA, as an organization that I am a founder and the lead of this organization for more than 14 years, was among first NGOs involved in PCVE in 2015, where one of our priority fields is building the culture of security and social cohesion. We have carried out a number of projects of voluntary initiatives aimed at a proactive engagement of youth in preventing violent extremism. There are a lot of activities, but some of them, there are key activities of our involvement in preventing and countering extremism, but also in the process of de-radicalization, rehabilitation, and reintegration of returnees from conflict zones include different projects like an integration approach to promote women and youth peace builders in Albania. This project aimed to emphasize, to enhance and to increase the skills of young individuals in areas such as peace and security, understanding the Human Rights Convention, working with the implementation of the Resolution 2250 to become a new agent of change. In 2022, another important project was for the first time the research with the title Examining Gender Component of Radicalization and Violent Extremism in Albania, where it was revealed that this phenomenon has affected women and their families as well, and society, by analyzing the push and pull factors in macro and micro level, where the results show that the patriarchal norms and the sense of non-belonging are some of the factors that push these women and their family to join the conflict zone in Syria. Through the establishment of Youth Peace Builders Network, we aim to train and promote youth as facilitator by providing a wider perspective in youth-led initiatives, supporting youth as advocator and participating in different conferences, in different discussion tables, such as municipalities, in municipality level, in national level, working with the international organization that works not only in the Albania, but in the regional level. We promote for youth new spaces and new area to engage in proactive engagement by advocacy and raising their voice. Such a phenomenon of violent extremism, crime, corruption, and the other concerns issues that are insecurity for our youth generation. Supporting youth also to peer-to-peer through the project peer-to-peer education, we reached more than 600 youth in a rural place by empowering youth to be a facilitator for their peer education and to increase the involvement of youth, not only in the urban, but also where the youth are at risk, specifically focused on the risk places. Another important issue is that we give to youth the space to lead initiatives, mini project sub-grantees, and the other opportunities that make youth a good practical way how they can be engaged, how they can fight the violent extremism, but also the other issues. So from 2019 till 2024, we are proud that 3,000 youth are engaged in our project, like a project Peace in My Reality, Defend Your Right, Act for Peace. We Care, We Act. I Am Like You, She Built Peace campaign, and youth voice against extremism violence. Another important group that we have targeted are young practitioners of religious communities who are engaged by addressing the issues in various aspects, such as theological, research, and practitioner one. Interfaith Collaboration Center, where I am an activist as well, is a part of our small forum of NGO in local level. And together we have promoted for the first time in Albania the model of summer camps for youth exchanges programs. These programs are particularly important to find not only violent extremism, but also all the kind of threats that affect human rights and freedom of beliefs, promoting interreligious dialogue that in Albania is still, in fact, unfortunately, in an embryonic phase and requires more investment and cooperation, especially when we discuss about the youth religious practitioner. In general, Albania has a low level of extremism compared to the other countries, but remains under observation for some potential risk. Albania is proud for the achievement in promoting interreligious tolerance, serving as a positive example in the region. This commitment has been recognized by prominent figures like His Excellency Pope Giovanni Paolo II during his visit in 1993 and the last visit of Pope Francesco in 2014. Both popes emphasized Albania for its tradition and of interreligious coexistence and cooperation, highlighting the significance of mutual respect among Catholics, Orthodox Christian, Muslims, and Protestants as well. In the end, Joseph Borrell, High Representative of the European Union, stated, "The world is home to the largest generation of young people in history, where, unfortunately, 600 million young people live in conflict or fragile situation, and around 264 million children and young people are out of the school. It is our responsibility to ensure that young people have the necessary means and opportunities to fully develop and participate in daily life." In conclusion, preventing of violent extremism requires efforts from all segments of society, where religious communities members should be more aware and active. This requires a commitment to education, empowerment, and inclusion. Seeing through the development of sustainable intervention and prevention perspective, the conference of today is a commitment to the other common collaboration that we should take to spread seed of peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina, for emphasizing the importance of youth as change agents and the essential need for education and inclusion, and for sharing really all your work. Thank you so much. Moving on, for the Buddhist perspective, we have with us today Reverend Elena Ceicin Viviani. She is the Vice President of the Italian Buddhist Union, and she has accompanied us since the beginning in this path of interreligious dialogue. So Reverend Viviani will talk to us about the role of meditation in the process from internal peace to peaceful society. So thank you for being with us again this year, Reverend Viviani. The floor is yours.
Buongiorno a tutti, è vero un piacere
Good
per me.
morning to everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. I wish to thank the organizers and all the guests. I know some of your faces, and this has become a very stimulating opportunity for all of us. So I was asked to speak about the topic of meditation, from inner peace to peace in society, the role of meditation. And my presentation is going to be divided into two parts. I'm first going to talk about meditation as it is in the Buddhist tradition and its contribution to the world. And on the other hand, I'm going to talk about a project which our union has been implementing for many years, Liberation Prison Project. It's a project addressed to prisons and prison inmates, and we shall see how it was developed and to whom it is addressed, and to understand the contribution of meditation to peace and to transforming people, not just prison inmates, though. So I'm going to say that it is well known that meditation in religions can be understood in many ways, and various meditative experiences all fall under the common denominator meditation, creating some confusion. Michael West, in The Psychology of Meditation, used to say that practices are just as different as dances among African tribes, and the spiritual exercises among the fathers of the desert were meditation practices, just as it happens in the Tibetan world. Understanding the value of meditation is to bring about a real revolution in our lives, opening us up to seeing reality as it is, i.e., no longer conditioned by our egocentrism and our attachments to what we think is right and convenient, which generally only works for ourselves. In Buddhism, despite the various schools, meditation has its own precise configuration that distinguishes it from all other type. It is a meditation based on one essential modality called mindfulness. Today, we know that this is called mindfulness. It is a notion that was also introduced as a practice in health activities, in hospices, in hospitals, but also in prisons as well. In ancient Buddhist texts, sati, awareness, is self-awareness, introspection, which becomes a daily habit, a kind of epoche of putting into brackets all that exists as something conditioned. It leads us to distancing from the world, but at the same time capable of grasping the various facets of the world's phenomena in all their forms, thus enabling us to become aware of the world itself and of the impermanence of everything around us. Today, meditation is often understood as a state of relaxation, beneficial from a psychological and therapeutic viewpoint, or even worse, as a dissociated or altered state of mind in which trance and ecstasy phenomena occur in meditative thinking. Well, this is very far indeed from what we consider as mindfulness, very much distant from what Heidegger defined as a quiet abandonment to what is most worthy of being asked. The meditation of which we speak is pure awareness in continuity with life and is on a par with our contemporaneity because it challenges us today, promising much to all of us who live in a condition of extreme discomfort in our culture. It becomes the only refuge against the threats that arise both outside and within ourselves. Outside of us, society seems chaotic and threatening because of constant stressful situations in which we are aggressed, and we need to address all these issues. The desert grows all around us, and the spirit is lost increasingly. We are increasingly dragged away from ourselves by an aggressive and increasingly depersonalized media world that erodes the very foundation of our possibility to experience. We are dragged from all sides, but always and inevitably away from ourselves, robbed of our really meager capacity to enter within ourselves. Thanks to ever new strategies, they make use of tools as powerful, as subtle, of annihilating our capacity to understand what is really going on in our mind in response to increasingly disturbing images and emotional stimuli. The attention deficit suffered by children and adolescents in identity crisis, but also the ever-increasing level of anxiety in the strata of the population is now evident. We have become slaves to our thoughts that, left unchecked, make a deafening noise inside us and increase our worries, magnifying all problems. The causes of this continuous threat to our mental equilibrium is induced by causes outside of us, but also by the weakness of the mind inside ourselves. It is increasingly difficult for us to control thoughts and actions. We almost experience a sort of internal implosion. The value of meditation becomes more and more evident. With meditation, it is a matter of undertaking inner work, as Corrado Pensa wrote. He just died, a spiritual guide for us Italian Buddhists. And Corrado used to say, an inner work is going to be rewarded because this work creates coherence in consciousness and in life, and above all, brings logical continuity with oneself. Mindfulness is within everybody's reach, and it is based on the magic of a simple exercise that can sum up an entire spiritual life program. But meditation should never be separated from action. And we know that Buddhism was born as an ortho practice, as a therapy. Buddhists call the great physician, and what he taught, a great medicine. So Buddhism, meditation and practice is not so much theory. Action, therefore, is internal to meditation. Action is meditation, and concentration and vice versa. Meditation has structures and rules so that it becomes an action in every day. The action generated by meditation is being totally in the world, as that world is transformed and regenerated through inner work. Action and the act of solidarity, openness to others, are necessary consequences of meditation and concentration. The practice of virtues, equanimity, compassion, kindness, charity, are perfected through the practice of a life of action, involving appropriate attitudes and behavior towards the other. Inner acceptance allows a clarity of action, but if we are not aware of an inner world and stick to a position of only indignation and anger, the result will be messy and confusing. The path of peace that Buddha discovers and pointed out to us leads to peace of mind and consists of sila, morality, samadhi, concentration, and prajna, wisdom. It is a path that is valid for everyone beyond one's religion. And through meditation, it is possible to bring out the light, moving from the crudeness of an individualistic and instrumental vision of life to the beauty and benefit that pacified mind represents for all. Through mindfulness, we can take care of ourselves, our actions, even the simplest. And that means taking care of others. It is one thing to keep in mind the whole list of bad attitudes to avoid. It is another thing to understand that the potential for these attitudes to grow lies within us and in us only. Using awareness, sati, to keep the mind reflective, concentrated in the present moment, thus achieving mental calm, is not such a difficult thing if the mind can take care of itself. Always being mindful every moment and in every posture. We know the Buddha teaches us awareness in the various postures, lying, standing, walking, and sitting. Before we perform any action, before we speak or engage in a conversation, let us establish mindfulness, collected before we do anything. Practicing mindfulness this way becomes a natural act, to be present even before acting or speaking. And this is the way to establish mindfulness in the heart, where the intentions that will produce action reside or originate. By practicing mindfulness and control to the point of making the natural attitudes, the mind becomes firm and resolute in the practice of what is ethical. By constantly taking care of our actions and words, we become completely responsible of our outward behavior. As already mentioned, inner acceptance develops a kind heart that is a feeling of closeness to all human beings, regardless of race, faith, or political affiliation. Pacifying the heart, tracing within oneself the roots of goodness and compassion, is a gateway to generate the same attitude towards the others, all members of the same human family. It cannot be repeated often enough that self-awareness to which meditation leads reduces suffering and allows one to achieve a more lasting state of happiness and to develop a feeling of universal responsibility, a deep concern for all, regardless of faith, skin color, gender, or nationality. We are deeply dependent on each other. We are so interdependent, so interconnected with one another, that without a feeling of universal responsibility, a sense of universal brotherhood and sisterhood, an understanding and conviction that we all belong to the same great human family, we cannot hope to overcome the dangers that threaten our existence, peace and happiness. We live with a false sense of security. Our lives are in a constant flux that also brings with it numerous difficulties. But if faced with a calm and clear mind, they can be resolved. However, when we lose control of our minds due to hatred, selfishness, jealousy, and anger, we also lose our capacity for judgment. Our minds are blind. And in those moments out of control, in those out of control moments, anything can happen, as it's plain for all to see. As pointed out in one of his speeches by His Excellency Dalai Lama, naturally, global peace cannot occur all at once, since conditions around the world are varied. Its spread will have to be incremental, but there is no reason why it cannot begin in one region and then spread gradually from one continent to another. Knowing our inner world, we are more likely to transform what threatens and pollutes the outer world. This, concerning the presentation of what we mean by meditation and its role in society. And I wanted, though, to share with you this project that the Italian Buddhist Union has been following for several years, but which already exists, the Liberation Prison Project. It is a project which is aimed at disseminating the practice of mindfulness and in prisons, mindfulness and awareness. And it is first of all addressed to pedagogical and legal officials, prison police, and it is also addressed to all the inmates, because it is very important to consider them not just in prison inmates, but persons who live a situation of pain outside of the prison. It is addressed to the families of the inmates and to all the administrations of the prisons themselves. We've received several awards and prizes, and this year with the university we are conducting a study on the effectiveness of mindfulness practices within prisons. We are present in many Italian cities, in Milan, Leghorn, Pisa, and I will not mention the others, with many operators, and we are speaking about at least 19 prisons that we are cooperating with, and they are now 27 and 3,500 hours of mindfulness and meditation groups, including individual interviews. And in the near future, if any of you is interested, we wish to share that mindfulness is particularly important in places of suffering such as prisons. So we are, of course, very much convinced that this project may be of great help, not only for those who have to spend time of their lives enclosed in a prison, but also the type of support that we can provide them is very important through this practice of mindfulness, and therefore, say, peacemaking in people's lives and in the lives of their families and in the lives of those who await them when they will one day leave prison. Thank you.
Very much, Reverend Viviani, for this sharing of this inner work for peace, and the example of this project in prisons. I think most of you will agree with me that we always learn something new from these gatherings and from the other religions. So thank you very much. And moving on, I will now give the floor to Swamini Hamsananda Giri. She is the vice president of the Italian Hindu Union and has also accompanied us in this path of dialogue and reflection since the very beginning. So she knows well the critical situations, but also the resilience of Hindu migrant women in Italy. So today we ask her to share her experience and reflections on intercultural dialogue and the attitudes of host cultures. So, Famini Hamsananda, the floor is yours. Si accende il microfono.
If you can kindly switch your mic on, because we cannot hear you. Can you hear me? We do. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Namaste to everyone. I am very happy to see many friends here, and I wish to greet all of you, particularly the friends that we encountered, we've met during these years of interreligious dialogue. And I would also like to greet Cardinal Ayuso and assure him that we and myself, I will pray for him and wishing him all the best for a speedy recovery. I'm very happy to be with you today to celebrate the International Women's Day, a day celebrated to honor the social, cultural, and economic, political results achieved by women. And here today, thank God, we are also accompanied by religious voices who talk about peace and who talk about encounter. And the vision of the Indian woman is a vision that was marked by many critical aspects and difficulties. So the Hindu woman is often seen as a woman who is suffering. But this is not true. This is what happens in the general vision of women, let's say. And women have in them a special strength, which we call Shakti. And we know that a civilization can be judged by the role played within it by women. And one of the many factors which justify the greatness of the ancient Indian culture, so Hinduism, is the place of honor given to women. The ancient society considered a daughter just the same as 10 sons. And in the text we read, where women are honored, there reside the gods. In Vedic society, women have the same status as men in all aspects of life. And according to the ancient Hindu scriptures, no religious rite can be carried out with perfection by a man without the participation of his wife. However, the condition of women and what they represent has changed considerably. In the medieval period, their status worsened and inequality, gender inequalities, became one of the greatest concerns. In the modern times, social reformers such as Rajana Mohan Roy and the enlightened leadership of the Mahatma Gandhi have contributed to put a brake on the worsening of the condition of women, reaffirming equality with men. The battle to demonstrate the intellectual abilities of women and break down the taboo in preventing them from accessing higher education has marked the birth of modernity and has involved all religions alike. The task of the so-called feminist theology during this stage consisted in unmasking this taboo as going against the will of God and asserting that God created men and women alike in terms of intelligence, and that they are all entitled to be able to develop their talents at the highest, makes brings this and makes this at the disposal of everyone as a good thing for the well-being of everyone. Many pioneering women paved the way, and many others today live with this task, this awareness aimed at guaranteeing equal access and equal participation to the decision-making process for women in the economic and political life and in society itself. The inclusion of women in the labor force has turned out to be the only step allowing families to abandon poverty. Migrant women are involved in protecting the family values within the family, but also they represent a social and economic resource. Despite all the progress made, however, we must still face in society some gender cliches that are very much rooted. There still is a great divide between the prospective goals, the religious principles, and the Dharma the Dharma and the completion of one's duties in the legislation, in policies, and in plans, in projects, and the various mechanisms within every micro society. On the one hand, and the real and actual situation of women's condition on the other. We must reach and fight for the possibility of recognizing freedom, the freedom of being women in diversity, of being women and not women dressed up as men. And this is something that both men and women must become aware of, and it must be cross-cultural and interfaith. Women must not give up or forget the power of the educational element, which is developed within the first so-called nucleus or core, which is the family. So it is within the family that you experiment love, you get to know it, and you learn to live it. Where you learn to have a dialogue. It is there within the family that first and foremost women can exert the possibility of transmitting, of passing on the values of equality, mutual respect, and spiritual values. Women are the guardians par excellence of everything that is pure and religious in life. This is what Mahatma Gandhi used to say. They are preservers by nature. If they are slow in abandoning superstition, custom, they are also slow in abandoning everything that is pure and noble in life. And this is evident through our communities because women sometimes have difficulties in abandoning their habits in favor of a society that nowadays is consumeristic and fast, but they still have this very strong will to pass on to the children their values that they think to be essential, those ancient values that are as old as the mountains. So once again, Mahatma Gandhi goes on to say, women are the companions of men. They have the same intellectual abilities. They have a right to participate in every part of men's activities. They have the same right to freedom and independence. They are entitled to the highest position in their field of activity, just as it is the case for men. This should be the natural situation of things and not just the result of learning to write or read. Quite simply, by virtue of an immoral value, and even whereby even the worst men have that over women an authority that they should not have. So these are the words of Mahatma Gandhi that have not yet been put into practice. We still need to reach this outcome within our communities. We still have a lot of work to do to be able to gain this awareness. But let us not forget that women today are also the source of an ability to disseminate spiritual values. Let us not forget the words of men and women who are in love with God who since the past and continuing today shed their love on humanity, washing away ignorance, purifying hearts, and eliminating those veils of illusion that imprison us within the limits of our existences. So I would like to conclude with the words of a saint, Sarava Devi, the founder of a monastic order, female monastic order in India at the end of the 19th century. These are her words. Open to the Lord your heart. Cry if you need, and pray the Lord sincerely to bring you towards him and to give you the peace of mind. This way, acting this way on a constant basis, you will gradually obtain quiet of the mind. Those who habitually pray and meditate will easily overcome all difficulties and will remain calm in the midst of life's trials. Peace comes from a pure heart. And I want to share a secret with you. If you wish for peace, do not try to find defects in the others. Look at your own guilt and defects and learn to look at the world as to yourself. Nobody is a foreigner. The world is no different from your own true self. Vasudeva Kudumakam. The world is an entire family. Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you so very much, Swamini Hamsananda, for your enriching contribution, in particular for reminding us about the traits of women and how men and women complement each other, right? And really the crucial role also of families. So thank you very much for being with us today. And moving on, our next panelist for the Jewish perspective is Rabbi Alison Zakharov. She has a deep passion and background in the field of interreligious dialogue, and she has studied at 2 pontifical universities in Rome, Yeshiva for Jewish Studies in Jerusalem, and she has also studied the Quran at the Interfaith Graduate School in Connecticut. Rabbi Zakharov regularly undertakes multi-faith projects, serves on several US interfaith dialogues, and attends international dialogue conference. And she currently leads the congregation of Beth Hativa in Summit, New Jersey, in the US. Thank you so much for being with us today. She will talk to us about interreligious dialogue and mediation among university students. So over to you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's so great to be with all of you for this International Women's Day conversation. So as we mentioned, I am a congregational rabbi in a small, very warm community in northern New Jersey outside of New York City. But before last August, I've spent the last 15 years really thinking about different religions and working with people of different religions. As part of that path, since you might have heard, I studied at a number of institutions as both an undergraduate and a graduate student. And last year I worked at New York University as their special advisor for spiritual life programming and religious discrimination. So an interfaith role for which I was hired because of my background in different religions, more than my training as a rabbi. And if you've read some of the news in the US, don't blame me about universities. There was only so much I could do in that 1 year. As an early note, I will be touching on some of the violence that has been going on in the Middle East over the last few months, as well as some of the anti-Semitism that's come up. So if you're not in a space to hear that, please be aware of that. So I wanted to share some wonderful concrete examples of amazing interfaith work that happens on college campuses here in the US. A number of campuses have different clubs that bring students together of different religions, Jewish-Muslim dialogue groups, Jewish-Christian dialogue groups, amazing things that are really doing work over the last, I would say especially the last 50 years, even maybe especially the last 20 and 30 years. One example was at Utah Valley University, which is out in a state that is a majority members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They had an interfaith movie club where students would come together and talk about movies together. Illinois, there's an Illinois university that has a massive interfaith conference every year. The Midwest is not always known for being the most diverse space, and yet I was there at the conference last year. The amount of information, the amount of awareness of the field and work in the field is very moving as folks engage on this topic. A lot of campuses have purposeful modeling of respectful dialogue. So for example, panels where they'll bring together professors of different religions to talk about hard topics, to show the students that this kind of dialogue not only is possible, but is really necessary. Some university courses bring people to different houses of worship in their university town to expose students to different religions. And often there are courses taught by clergy of different faiths. So maybe you'll have a rabbi and an imam talking about a topic of common interest. Also in the United States, there's an organization called Interfaith America, formerly Interfaith Youth Corps, IFYC, which is a great institution that is really focused on training our college students to know how to have respectful dialogue around religion. As their original cohort of students trained in undergrad has gotten older, their focus has kind of split to both support college students and then support those of us that are past college. Certainly, this work in the US has never been perfect. Issues in Israel and Palestine have always led to flare-ups. I've also seen campuses where a mindset, such as a very liberal mindset, kind of excludes certain religious perspectives, or vice versa. I am sure conservative campuses perhaps not allowing more liberal religious perspectives. But one amazing American ideal that many of us, including myself, hold very dear is the concept of the separation of church and state here in the US. So something different than religious majority or officially religious countries. The idea sometimes allows for more dialogue on campuses, because as folks are perhaps not as comfortable with religious perspectives, if it's a university that's funded by public funds, there is a need to support and encourage and allow for religious diversity. So now to speak for a minute about the Jewish experience on campus. And I am one Jew with one opinion, so please note a lot of folks have different experiences. So I have often seen in college spaces actually how Jewish students are really key leaders in interfaith dialogues. And there are a lot of historic reasons for this that I don't have time to share, but one I will share is hope. It is a Jewish value to hope. We hope that by engaging with our neighbors, we can combat anti-Semitic stereotypes. We hope that by sharing our rituals, people will make less assumptions about us and maybe feel less scared by what they do not know. And we hope that by knowing us, our peers will be able to better stand with us in times of really intense anti-Semitism. But we are a minority, and it can sometimes be easy to forget that, but we are quite a significant minority around the world. What this means in interfaith dialogue spaces on campuses is that there are fewer of us to share our perspectives. This is a challenge of many minorities. If there's an interfaith panel and you only have a handful of Jewish students, we are asked again and again to be on that, which is beautiful and also difficult in terms of amount of work. It also means that a lot of people have never actually met a Jewish person in any significant way, which means a lot of explaining, a lot of work on our part to try to make sure people understand it, which is a beautiful opportunity and also challenging. And not everybody's up to that challenge because it is a lot of work. Which means that a lot of times people rely on stereotypes because they don't know Jews, because they can't meet Jews. Like when I was in college and somebody met me, I think having never met a Jew, and asked where my horns were, which is of course based on a mistranslation of a Hebrew word. So what this brings me to is that a lot of this results in anti-Semitism. I mentioned hope earlier, that we hold on to hope as a Jewish people, and sadly, all too often since October 7th, those hopes have been dashed. As a minority that has always faced anti-Semitism and baseless hate, and as people of faith, I hope if you're not familiar with the history of anti-Semitism and how it is a unique hatred that comes up every generation, I hope you will do some research on that. Anti-Semitism has always been there below the surface for some of us throughout our lives, perhaps for some of us not so below the surface, depending on our context. But in my life, very much under the surface until the last few months. We have seen all too often the world divided in these last months since the massacre on October 7th and the ensuing war. So much of the dialogue has turned into all one or all the other. Are you all Israel or all Palestine? I hope we can all be all humanity. But that directly impacts college campuses. And I am sure if you've looked at some of the news here in the US, that has been a major challenge on our campuses. I have spoken to families whose Jews have chosen to take down their mezuzot, their mezuzah that marks their doorway, out of fear. I have seen protests that lead to violence, really concerning things that impact the students on our campuses and their ability to engage with other people out of fear. This happened at Cornell when a student threatened to shoot and kill and rape Jews on that campus. It has happened at other campuses as well in various ways. I have previously seen times when interfaith communities on campuses can weather difficult storms, but I will be honest with you, as a Jew and as a Jewish leader, this feels different. This feels like a different time. And yet, I couldn't conclude as I am with optimism, and yet we hope. We come back to that hope. We are called as Jews to partner with God to help create Olam Haba, the world to come, when peace and harmony will finally reign. This is what interfaith dialogue is about. It's about pushing through what can feel like impossible times. My hope is that the work of these last decades on college campuses in the US to create these encounters, to create these clubs, often led by women, strong women, I hope that that foundation helps set us up so that perhaps even if in this moment the dialogue is too difficult, that one day, we will be able to return to the conversation around our beautiful, unique, inspiring, and meaningful differences. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Allison, for sharing your testimony and concrete examples of what's happening in the US, of interfaith work within university environments. So thank you for your ongoing efforts, really also for dialogue. So moving on to the ecumenical perspective, I am pleased to introduce you to Reverend Dr. Putsita Nawamba. She is the World Council of Churches Program Director for Unity, Mission, and Ecumenical Formation, and is an ordained minister of the United Church of Zambia. She also serves as assistant professor at the World Council of Churches Ecumenical Institute, which is affiliated with the University of Geneva. And today we ask her to share with us her inputs on how women leaders of Christian communities have collaborated in peace processes. So thank you, Kuzipa, for being with us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lavinia, and thank you, WUCWO leadership, for this invitation. Second year in a row that I'm participating in this forum, and it's a privilege. I join in sending well wishes to Cardinal Ayuso. The Dicastery for Interreligious Dialogue collaborates with our Interreligious Desk, and once a year they host each other, in either sides. So we wish him well on behalf of the WCC. So I am bringing this ecumenical perspective from the standpoint of the WCC, the World Council of Churches, which has 352 member churches in 8 regions globally, and particularly speaking to one program area, the just community of women and men. So according to us in the WCC, the first encounter, ecumenical encounter, was the meeting between Adam and Eve. The two had to learn to live with each other in diversity and unity as male and female, both bearing the image of God. So the understanding that arises from that is that women have a complementary role and are essential to contribute to all dimensions of life for the whole community. Within the WCC, from the beginning of the 20th century, it was before the WCC itself as an organization was formed, but the seeds that led to it, women's voices, were important, and they were particularly mobilized through the Young Women's Christian Fellowship and the Women's Day of Prayer. In fact, this week we are actually observing, the Women's Day of Prayer. So this day brings women from different countries and cultures and into encounter. So it's a way, it opens a window of encountering each other, getting to know about others elsewhere in the world. Through prayer, women declare their dependence on God's Spirit to act in solidarity with others and by availing their talents for service of society. this year, which marks 99 years of the World Day of Prayer, Palestinian women prepared the prayers, reflecting on the war situation and channeling their advocacy. Women and men from all over the world have joined the online choir, which, they've been singing the theme song for this year, and it's simply titled, I Urge You, as a way of summoning people from all walks of life to affirm life together. So in prayer, the ecumenical family joins with the Palestinian women who have prepared, these prayers in sowing seeds of peace and in their encounter with God and with one another and with the reality of the conflict, that is going in that context. Issues of war have been a part of our history as the WCC, in that the WCC was founded as a post-Second World War institution parallel to the United Nations. So if you look at a brief historical timeline, it gives us a snapshot of how the programs of the WCC have developed and what the place of women in those programs has been. So women's leadership at the formation of the WCC, we are only now beginning to tell the story from those perspectives. In the 1930s and the 1960s, there are stories of women whose profiles are not always self-evident, but they contributed because they were concerned about the post-war efforts. The community of women and men in the church was the focus in the 1970s and 80s, and the profile of women, was again, enhanced through that. The ecumenical decade of churches in solidarity with women in the 1990s was a decade long focusing on, the different experiences of women, and war situations were a particular focus. And there have been many reflections that arise from that, highlighting particularly the agency of women. In the 2000s, the focus has been being church, overcoming violence, and examining masculinity as the focus. So women who are members or leaders of the Christian communities have contributed to peace processes through participation in programs, like this. So what happens is that they translate the thematic foci into their own local context. And usually it's not implemented by Christians on their own. There's an interreligious dimension, and there's a connection often with civil society and global multilateral organizations. And in this presentation, I give an example of women in Liberia, for instance, where Christians and Muslims, were directly involved in the formal and informal negotiations for peace. In the same way, in the Korean Peninsula, the women cross the demilitarized zone, highlights the physical presence of women in being peacemakers. And these women are usually from parachurch organizations. They could be church leaders, but they are primarily lay women who use their agency and activism to advocate for the reuniting of the two Koreas. And women in conflict, I'll just move very quickly. Women in conflict, today, we can again give examples of how women have participated. If you think about, what in Myanmar, Ukraine, Korea, women usually suffer, collateral damage and are subjected to sexual abuse and weaponized in wars that is hardly their making. So we have stories of challenges of maternal difficulties that we have already heard from other presentations earlier. Women, by rising to protect their own children and to protect themselves, realize their agency in these situations. We've also, in our programming, come to, examples of, like in the like of Sudanese and Korean women on the question of trauma, living with, post-war trauma, and how women are involved, not just, in those traumatic experiences, but in the healing, as well. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, we have similar, situations where, the women who are adversely affected, become advocates. Their powerful stories, become, agents, for change. Women working to prevent sexual violence as a weapon of war. Women, as I said earlier, by protecting their own children and lamenting, the suffering of their themselves and the children and the society at large, really is a channel through which, their suffering becomes public and the women's agency is highlighted. Awareness about, child abuse and violence is usually, communicated, through these experiences. And I have given in the paper that I submitted, some links to some of the work that we have done, around this in the Council of Churches commitment to child rights and, the WCC child safeguarding, policy. We also, in regard to that, have, the Thursdays in Black campaign, which is we wear black on Thursdays as a way of directing attention, to the suffering of women, particularly, survivors of, sexual and domestic, violence. Now, obviously, black, has been used, in to connotate, different things, usually negative. But in this particular instance, the color black is used as a color of resistance and a color of resilience. And again, I give a link, to just, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that. We also have stories of survivors who make a response to violence and, build peace. The case of South Sudan churches to overcome the trauma through, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission style, where, they tell their stories and seek mental and spiritual healing, as a way of, continued transformation. And, they also offer methodologies, from, these very experiences that are replicated in other spaces. So, and we saw that during our pilgrimage of justice and peace, when women pilgrims were sent to different parts of the world, to be in solidarity with communities that had suffered violence. And we saw these methodologies being applied, to continue the work and to become, multipliers. The Butterfly Women of South Korea, for instance, their weekly Wednesday demonstrations in front of the Japanese embassy, which has been going on for many years, attracts many Christians who are, concerned about this cause, but other faiths as well, and the civil society. There are several other examples that I could give, but I would just like to jump, to talk about, the examples that I highlighted earlier, because these are systematic ways in which women have participated. The movement in Liberia that I spoke about was particularly, built around the leadership of Lema Bowie. And following her leadership, the movement organized, strategic tactics that would ensure the mass mobilization of women internationally to end violence against women, in their country. And that, became a movement, that attracted, many women within the society. And it became, a symbol of hope, to redress, systemic injustice, particularly within West Africa. The Global Women's Negotiating Team of Crossing, the Demilitarized Zone that I spoke about is also another example that has led, to, the YWCA, the Young Women Christian Association, women, meeting government leaders and speaking about the peace process. And it led to the Security Council adopting the resolution on women and peace, in the year 2000. So, we can see how, the efforts of women and, the sometimes acting from their own suffering and trauma, become, catalytic, to the societal response, to violence. Having said all that, despite, the impressive efforts, there are still drawbacks, about women, continuing to be sowers of these seeds of peace. Despite the efforts of the WCC, for instance, other bodies, there's still intentional exclusion of women in many spaces. Women are not always in leadership of churches, and so they do not sit naturally around the tables, or that direct action, or that moot out the policies that govern church life, and so in that instance we speak of women already being systematically marginalized. So hopefully, on the other hand, we don't want to be despondent. We see that women, despite, these impediments, have risen to the challenge. And so there is, hope. In this strategic period, we came from the Assembly in 2022. We have embarked on the pilgrimage of justice, reconciliation, and unity, which includes gender justice, peace, and peace. Without sexual and gender-based violence, as an important part of the church's justice and peace agenda, we do not see that, we could move forward. From where we stand, this is a theological and missiological imperative that, should continue to grow with us. And so we acknowledge the accomplishments and the contribution of women and their agency, but we still, see that there's still room, much room for improvement. And so in the ecumenical movement, and beyond, we see that sign of hope, but we also see the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Cosipa, for your contribution. And really the examples of women as mediators and negotiators in peace processes and their contributions are particularly interesting. So thank you for sharing those with us. Now moving on, finally, for the Catholic perspective, I am happy to introduce you to Mrs. Valeria Martano. She's a historian and active member of the lay Catholic community of Sant'Egidio, where she focuses largely on Asia. She has been actively involved in peace negotiations and work for interfaith harmony in the Philippines. So her work focuses on solidarity, globality, human development, interreligious dialogue, and peace. So based on her experience and mission, I asked her, what does peace look like in times of war? Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lavinia. Thank you all. Let me express my gratitude for being invited to share these topics today together with so many women from different cultures and religions. Actually, while rumors of war increase around us, it's important to ask ourselves, what does peace look like in times of war? The words of the Holy Pope John Paul II come to our aid. In 1986, concluding the historical day of prayer for peace among the representatives of religions, he said, peace awaits its prophets, peace awaits its builders. Peace is a workshop open to all and not just to specialists, savants, and strategists. Peace is a universal responsibility. It comes about through 1,000 little acts of daily life. A workshop, a universal responsibility. This call was the start of a new season of dialogue and collaboration of the Catholic Church with women and men of different religions. And peace became our shared commitment. It's for myself, because from that time I started to go around Asia, meeting people from Japan to Philippines and so on, and Indonesia and Pakistan. But it is a commitment, a shared commitment of the Catholic Church. Becoming artisans of peace was our task. After many years, the world is facing very serious crises, too many wars. We have before our eyes the tragic scenes of the war in Ukraine or in Gaza, but right now there are 59 active conflicts in the world. Many are forgotten. Each of them is a tragedy. Many last for decades and no one can say when they will end. The paths of dialogue seem blocked, and Pope Francis spoke of a Third World War fought piecemeal in danger to be transformed into a genuine global conflict. In front of this scenario, again, we receive the invitation to be artisans of peace. And the unanimous teaching of the Catholic Church through the voices of our popes calls to reject the culture of the enemy. And it always seeks the resolution of conflicts through peace. In times of war, people seem to be forced to take a side, to find an enemy to hate. And this polarization creates, even where there is no use of weapons, hostility, hate speech, and violence. This is happening also in our society. The magisterium of the Pope rejects this logic. No one or the other side is the enemy, but war itself is the only one. It is a useless massacre, as Pope Benedict XV said, or an adventure of no return for John Paul II. War never again was the appeal of Pope Paul VI at the UN in 1965. And Pope Francis, who incessantly calling for peace, states, we are not neutral, but aligned for peace. Therefore, we invoke jus pacis as everyone's right to resolve conflicts without violence. These words encourage us to a daily commitment to make a culture of peace grow. The matter is making people recognize one another as sisters and brothers, part of a single human family. Actually, as Pope Francis says, again I quote him, war, before it reaches the front, must be stopped in the hearts. Hatred must be eradicated from hearts. And to do this, there is a need for dialogue, negotiation, listening, creativity, because every war represents a shameful surrender in the face of the forces of evil. Those who do not surrender to forces of evil, they are artisans of peace. And I think this is our task. And I want to give some example of this. What peace looks like in our sorrowful times of war. Peace looks like a Ukrainian woman who spends the night in underground shelters, hugging her children during bombing. Her name is Olia. And then in daytime, she helps those who have lost their homes, their jobs, their loved ones to the war, distributing food and medicine. They are many women like that, and I know their names and their stories. And for 2 years, they are incessantly spending themselves with generosity, and I would say heroism, to sow peace in a country where the war does not come to an end, where hatred grows and makes so many victims. Peace looks like who welcomes migrants. And my friends are now, in this moment, receiving about 100 migrants from Libya, from the terrible concentration camps of Libya coming to Italy, thanks to humanitarian corridors. We try to take them out from this terrible slavery. Because our world often closes its doors to many who seek a better life. In the refugee camps in Pakistan, Indonesia, Greece, in Cyprus, I met young women and men fleeing war, hunger, seeking a peaceful future facing bitter rejection, listening to their suffering, offering welcome and hope, working for their integration in a world that should be a family of peoples and not a locked gate. It's the work for peace. It's what peace looks like. Women mostly suffer from war as mothers, wives, sisters, daughters. And so, precisely for this reason, women, we can, and I would say must, cultivate the culture of peace as a shared passion, as a commitment to the education of young generations. Edith Bruck, a Jewish writer who was detained in Auschwitz, tells that when she was in the camp as a child, where everything was dark, 5 lights encouraged and made her alive and hopeful. 5 small gestures of kindness, solidarity, mercy. This is what peace may look like in the dark times of war. Let's switch lights of hope in the darkness. In the book of the prophet Isaiah, we read that in the darkness a cry is heard. Watchman, how long the night will last? And the watchman replies, morning is coming. The night again, if you want to ask, ask, repent and come. We hear the cry for peace of many. We don't know how long the night of war will last, but we know that the morning will come and that we can prepare a dawn of peace. Switching lights of hope, cultivating the art of encounter, as we are doing in this wonderful webinar, not only today, and we can do it with prayer, dialogue, and solidarity. I think this is the workshop where today, more than ever, we are called to work together as artisans of peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Matano, for your encouraging words and for reminding us, right, that peace is a universal responsibility, a shared commitment, and then we can all become artisans of peace. So thank you very much. Now, I'm afraid we won't have time for questions, but before moving on to the conclusions, I wish to give some space for some brief remarks and comments to our patronesses. Since a few years, we have been able to count on the support of different ambassadors to the Holy See, with whom we have tied a close collaboration, especially with the group of female ambassadors to the Holy See that grows year by year. So I thank them for their support, and first of all, give the floor to Her Excellency Mrs. Florence Mangin, Ambassador of France to the Holy See. Thank you, Excellency.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Secrétaire Générale, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Secretary General. Thank you, Mrs. President. I wish also to thank the sister representing the Cardinal, to whom I wish all the best for a speedy recovery. Dear participants, I'm really happy to be here this afternoon with you, and I would like to congratulate myself with the WUCWO for choosing this team that keeps us together this afternoon. So, placing value on the role of women in the quest for peace in a world marked by war, and the representative of Sant'Egidio just reminded us of the fact that there are 54 conflicts which are ongoing in the world today. Well, it's very important to remember that when we are determined, then women can truly play an important role, and this is what they do every day, for them to go towards their neighbors and to put an end to war. So thank you again for this topic, this theme that we are celebrating here. I would like to focus on the topic of culture as a way, and I as a way to reach peace. And I will share with you two examples of initiatives which have been undertaken by France. Culture and art can act as a common denominator among communities or between communities that have difficulties in initiating a dialogue, to promote dialogue on difficult, sensitive issues, and therefore be an instrument of the encounter. And as far as France is concerned, I would like to mention two organizations which use culture to promote exchanges on social and interreligious topics. The first association I would like to mention is called Les Bâtisseuses de Paix, so the Builders of Peace. And it was set up in 2002 after the Second Intifada, with the aim of promoting interreligious dialogue in France between the communities belonging to different religions, trying to reduce tensions, diffuse tensions between these communities. It involves some 60 Jewish and Muslim women who get together for cultural exchanges and for educational activities in the Parisian region, particularly and a particular address to young people. So they live mainly on the banlieues, the outskirts of Paris. So the Bâtisseurs de Paix organize writing workshops in the schools of the Parisian suburbs. And for instance, after the terrorist attacks of Charlie Hebdo in 2015, they distributed a book called, which in English sounds The Great Mosque of Paris, How the Muslims Saved the Jews from the Shoah during the Second World War. So they united some students to get them to know this story that they were not aware about. So the fact that some Muslims saved the Jews from the Holocaust. Another association that works for a juster world through culture is called Opera for Peace. And so it was funded by Julia Lagauzère, who was named Woman of Culture in 2020. This association allows young artists from all over the world, from disadvantaged backgrounds or countries at war or in crisis, to receive a high-level musical training or education and to promote exchanges among the cultures. So exchanges and encounter. Opera for Peace finds young talents all over the world, particularly in countries at war, helping them to develop, to develop a career in the musical sector, allowing the world of culture to become a player in the world of peace building. And I'm happy to say that this organization is going to organize a masterclass for young talents at the Villa Medici in Rome. So you may get to know this association and these young talents who are promoted by this association. So these were just two small examples, which are not exhaustive, of course, illustrating the diversity of initiatives led by women to ensure permanent exchanges based on respect, dialogue. So they are made up by women, and thank you very much for your attention.
Of these French associations. Thank you for being with us today. And now I give the floor to Her Excellency, Mrs. Chiara Porro. She's the Ambassador of Australia to the Holy See. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Lavinia, and good afternoon, everyone. I also want to begin by thanking WUCWO, and in particular the President, Monica, and also you, Lavinia, for inviting me to take part in this event, and really thank all the speakers that we've heard from today for all their diverse perspectives and their contributions over the many years. It's really a pleasure to be joining again this year with WUCWO to mark International Women's Day. It's a pleasure as usual to support WUCWO's efforts and all the work that they do. Unfortunately, International Women's Day this year, as other speakers have also mentioned, comes very much amid a worsening climate for global security. We see renewed violence in many corners of the world, a resurgence in intolerant and divisive rhetoric that takes us further away from the aims of stability and prosperity that millions of us share, women and men alike. And in the midst of these fragile conditions, we know that women and girls continue to bear the brunt of war, extremism, and violence brought by state actors, but increasingly also by criminal networks and terrorist groups. Women and girls are forced to deal with humanitarian catastrophes precipitated by internal or cross-border displacement, the lack of basic needs, inadequate healthcare and food insecurity, among others. So sadly, for many women around the world, this International Women's Day will not be a day to consider their achievements and celebrate progress. Many will have to put on hold their struggles for equal rights, their campaigns to end violence, to end forced marriage or deep-rooted injustices. Many will have to press pause on their lives and futures to fend for themselves and their families, as we heard also from Valeria. But my first thoughts today, therefore, are with these millions of women who not unjustifiably believe there's little to celebrate this coming 8th of March. But thankfully, conversations like the one we are having today reassure us that whilst women are unfairly affected by violence and conflict, they also represent some of the most admirable and underutilized resource in peace building. The examples we've heard today of women around the world who have shown the courage to very much sow the seeds of peace are numerous. There are women in Africa who have mobilized against the use of rape as a weapon of war, the contribution of women mediators worldwide, halting the escalation of violence at the local level. And let's not forget women around the globe, whether they are law enforcement agents, NGO workers, or religious sisters who are engaged in the combat against domestic violence, modern slavery, human trafficking, whilst also offering the vital emotional support that victims need. Over 2 decades ago, in October 2000, the countless experiences of women in fostering peace drove the United Nations Security Council to adopt Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security. And this resolution was the culmination of decades of work by civil society and women's groups, particularly in conflict-affected countries. And it sought to highlight the important roles that women and girls play in conflict prevention, peace processes, and to promote stability and security. And countries like mine, like the Australian government, have built on this important resolution through our National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security, which we first implemented in 2012 and have since renewed. And it's very much reaffirming our vision that women are key to economic growth, development, stability, and durable peace. And so we look to increase female participation in peace processes, resilience building, justice and reparation, and programs to end sexual and gender-based violence. All issues that, of course, take an even greater relevance in view of the challenges that we are facing now. And Australia also recognises that these aims can only be effective by working in partnership with others. And this is where our connections in diplomacy, in security, through overseas aid and international development, but of course with faith-based organisations has been so critical and continues to be very, very critical. We know that faith leaders can make a difference to the issues that matter, and we saw this very clearly last year at the COP28 in Dubai, which hosted the first ever Faith Pavilion. And we saw faith leaders, including Pope Francis, use this platform to call for an ambitious deal to address the existential threat that is posed by climate change. The hope for many of us, I think, is that faith leaders come together to take bold action on issues such as gender-based violence, economic empowerment of women and girls, and female participation in decision-making and peacemaking. But of course, women are still often underrepresented in the leadership of religions around the world. And so hearing the voices of women, including their engagement in interfaith dialogue through events like today, remains critical. And we're seeing this firsthand in processes like the ongoing Synod on Synodality within the Catholic Church. Next week, I will be hosting an event in Geneva at the Human Rights Council on the perspectives and voices of women on the issue of freedom of religion or belief. And this is another initiative which is underpinned by the firm conviction that women's rights are human rights, and that the interest in promoting them is universal and a central tenet of all religions and faith traditions. So I'll leave you with these few brief thoughts, but I again want to pay tribute to all the speakers today and to thank them for their engagement and commitment, particularly in this interfaith dialogue, and my best wishes to everyone for the upcoming International Women's Day. Thanks again, Lavinia, for the time.
Thank you, Excellency, and thank you for reminding us to keep in our prayers all those women that are suffering in these days, really. And now I give the floor to Her Excellency, Mrs. Annemiek Roygrok, Ambassador of the Netherlands to the Holy See. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Lavinia, and thank you to all of you at WUCWO and all the panelists for this very interesting afternoon. Thank you again for inviting me. I feel truly honored. And first of all, I want to commend WUCWO for organizing this kind of events for 5 years in a row now on the occasion of National Women's Day. You only do not connect women to faith, but you also connect women worldwide to the search of peace and common understanding. We heard earlier this afternoon how important the role of faith and faith-based organizations can be to help communities along on the way to peace by dialogue and encounters, by trying to understand each other and really listening to each other. And from my own experience in the Netherlands, I know how important this is. I grew up in a country in the Netherlands in a very segmented society. We called it pillarized, in which you would only socialize with people from your own faith, not only in school, from kindergarten to university, but also in sports, political parties, and all sorts of other associations. You hardly ever met people from other faiths, so you didn't know them and didn't understand them. And the lack of understanding can cause hostility, and every now and then it did, and even worse. So we came to realize how important it is to meet, to understand, and to respect each other. And in present times, more than ever. And also in the Netherlands, we now understand that faith can play an important positive role in this context. Because even though faith may be different, as we heard today, there is a common basis. And that's why, for instance, the Netherlands has set up a program aimed at supporting faith-based communities in 7 countries in the Middle East, in Africa and Asia, to contribute to the promotion of freedom and religion, and also to transform conflict and build peaceful and just societies. The aim is that they do this by entering into interfaith coalitions at multiple levels, and thereby showing that different religious traditions can come together because they share a vision of a better and more just society. And in very many instances, again, as we heard today, these projects are led by women. Mutual understanding is the beginning of a fruitful encounter, and encounters are the beginning of harmony. You're all working to achieve that in different ways, in different parts of the world, and from different religious backgrounds. And I want to thank you for that. So with that, let me thank you for your attention. And once again, thank you for inviting me.
We thank you, Excellency, for your encouraging words and for your support. And now, before wrapping up, allow me to give the floor to Monica Santamarina, WUCWO's president, for some quick closing remarks. Monica.
Okay, thank you, Lavinia. I promise to be very fast. It is getting late. First, of course, we all joined together with Cardinal Ayuso. We're praying for him, for his quickly recovery. We thank you, Sister Grace, for the beautiful words she read. where, of course, the most important is, like Mary, we have to increase and deepen our faith, and then to be able to reach the most needed neighbors with love. I just want to thank very, very fast Reverend Elena for those beautiful initiatives for involving young people in peace processes. All the work she's doing in Albania and worldwide, young people should be included in this. They are victims, and we want to be the first world changers. So we have to work a lot with young people. I thank Reverend Elena for reminding us how important is the basic meditation based on mindfulness that cannot be separated from action. It's so urgent in a world so stressed that tends to alienate us and tends to make us forget about ourselves. So peace starts within ourselves. So we have to work in it. I'd like to thank Swabini for the Hindu perspective, talking about the complementation of women and men and the important role women has always had in families and in communities. And then Rabbi Allison, thank you for the work you have done with young people in colleges. And I really do hope that you all recover soon hope. We want you to recover hope, regain hope, and we have to work together to end all kinds of discrimination. Then, of course, Dr. Kusina from the World Council of Churches, so many things you're doing, so many. I recommend everybody to listen in YouTube to all the initiatives, to listen again to this webinar, so we can learn about the different initiatives they've been speaking about. And well, finally, what can I say about the presentation of Valeria Matanzo? It was so important. I mean, it's very sad to see we have 59 conflicts, active conflicts now. It was great to know what peace looks like, the beautiful testimonies that she told us. The polarization, we have to finish with polarization, eradicate hatred, and as Pope Francis has told us, and let us go on working with peace, with creativity. We must go on sowing seeds of peace and cultivating encounter with hope, because together we're gonna be able to achieve it. Thank you all. Thank you, our ambassadors that always work for us. Of course, for the Australian ambassador, our French ambassador, our Netherlands ambassador, they are friends, they are always with us. Thank you, Lavinia. Thank you, our great team in the Secretariat, everybody who helped us, and thank you all who watched us, and especially thank you again to all the brave women of faith that are cultivating seeds for encounter. Let's go on working with hope, and thank you very much to all of us.
Thank you, Monica. I think I don't need to add any more thanks. We've thanked really everyone for joining us. We thank the dicastery and all the attendees from all around the world, WUCWO staff and the interpreters for their great help today. I wish you peace to all and see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.